Listen closely, because what you are about to hear is a real story. The year is 1934, the heart of the Great Depression, and Cleveland breathes out clouds of soot-laden air that cling to its crooked alleys like regret. Freight whistles moan across the Cuyahoga River, lamplight trembles in puddles of gasoline, and somewhere in the darkness, a hand sharpens a bone saw for reasons only madness can explain. Factories rattle, speakeasies hum beneath crumbling viaducts, and the unlucky cling to tin roof shanties in a ravine called Kingsbury Run, an urban scar where the city dumps its garbage, and soon it's dead. Imagine the narrator's voice lowering to a hush. Close your eyes and walk with me. We descend into that ravine, past rail spurs and hobo camps where cook fires glow like dying comets. It smells of iron, tar, and cheap gin. This is where the butcher will strike, swift, silent, surgical, leaving headless corpses that seem less like people and more like warnings carved in meat. Over the next 4 years, at least a dozen souls will be cut to pieces, their torsos staged like grotesque postcards to a city already staggering under hunger and unemployment. Police will scratch lines of chalk around severed limbs. Reporters will nickname the killer Headhunter, Torso Slayer, Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. And leading the hunt, his famous fedora pulled low, will be Eliot Ness, the Untouchable now safety director, who once caged Al Capone but can't seem to trap a phantom who moves through Cleveland's underbelly with a surgeon's grace. This is not a tale for the faint of heart. It is a plunge into smoke-stained noir, where every dim alley flickers like a projector reel spooling doom. Keep your coat collar high and your nerves taut. The cleaver is already rising, and the night is very, very long. Chapter 1. Shadows stretch over Kingsbury Run. The voice begins above the city, drifting like fog off Lake Erie. Picture Cleveland at dusk. It murmurs, with steel mills ringing their final shift and bread lines sagging around Public Square. Boxcars clank while desperate men hop aboard, chasing rumors of work 100 miles away. Yet for some, the tracks lead only to Kingsbury Run, a ravine 2 miles long, cut deep and ragged between downtown and the neighborhoods of Slavic Village. It is here, on September 5th, 1934, that the first body makes itself known. It starts with a dog, half-starved, ribs counting time, sniffing at something pale jutting from a thicket of goldenrod. A transient named Ed Kovacs hears the animal's whimper and investigates, expecting maybe a discarded ham bone. Instead, he finds a torso. Female, naked, scrubbed clean, the head nowhere in sight. Flies swarm, indifferent to human outrage. Kovacs staggers backward, retching into weeds, then sprints toward the shantytown to raise the alarm. Police flashlight beams sweep the scene, cracking darkness into shards. Detectives Walter M. Mellon and Peter Merillo kneel beside the body, trading glances that admit what their lips won't. This is no routine murder. The killer has removed the victim's head and severed both legs above the knee, sawing through bone with tidy precision. No blood remains. Whoever did this drained her elsewhere, wiping the skin in some chemical bath that leaves it eerily pale, almost waxen. Within hours, newspapers shriek headlines about a lady of the lake, though no one yet knows she is merely prologue. Clevelanders devour every grisly detail, desperate for distraction from foreclosure notices and soup kitchen gruel. But between bold-face type and sensational sketches, an undercurrent of dread seeps in. If someone can butcher a woman so clinically, what chance does any destitute drifter have? Police comb through missing person reports, but the depression has rendered identity slippery. Migrants vanish every day, swallowed by joblessness and railroad miles. Autopsy surgeon Dr. Samuel Gerber studies the remains under harsh white lights. He notes fine striations on bone, evidence of a keen blade stroked steadily, almost lovingly. Ligature marks around the wrists suggest bondage. Cause of death, he rules, is decapitation while the victim was still alive. The room falls silent as he speaks those words. Even men accustomed to morgue horrors feel their stomachs knot. Gerber removes his spectacles, wipes dew from the lenses, and murmurs that the killer is either highly trained or profoundly patient, likely both. Yet summer drifts into autumn, with no fresh leads. Patrolmen question hobos, roust bootleggers, and raid flophouses, but Kingsbury Run is a labyrinth of transient misery. Memories are blurred by cheap whiskey and constant flight. Days shorten. Smokestacks belch soot that settles on rooftops like black snow, and Cleveland's pulse slows to a nervous tick. Somewhere, the butcher waits. January 1935 arrives, brittle and gray. A young paperboy darts along Broadway Avenue when he glimpses something tangled in river ice. Two halves of a man's torso, severed at the waist. Frozen flesh glints pink beneath thin daylight, while chunks of coal float like charred confetti around him. Police hack the body free with pickaxes. Again, no head. Again, limbs removed with surgeon-like skill. Pockets of newspaper stuffed into the chest cavity bear fragments of a name. John Doe No. 2, the press will later sigh, unable to christen the dead with anything more personal. Patterns emerge. Victims are poor, often vagrants, chosen from society's blind spot. Mutilations are meticulous, torsos washed, sometimes treated with oil. Heads vanish, as if the killer cannot bear for eyes to accuse him later. And always the dump sites lie in or near Kingsbury Run, a theater of rusted girders and boxcars, lit by garbage fires and the occasional spotlight of police search teams. The city's moral guardians howl for action. Church hymns swell with pleas for divine protection. Politicians promise crackdowns. Saloon gossip claims the killer is a failed medical student living in a brothel basement. Meanwhile, Detective Merillo begins spending nights undercover in rail yard jungles, posing as a jobless bricklayer named Slim. He eats mulligan stew with tramps, shares cigarettes rolled from scavenged tobacco, and listens. Rumors flicker. A tall man with surgical scissors, a butcher who sells suspicious meat, a drifter who keeps souvenirs in a doctor's bag. None pan out. Spring creeps in, but hope does not. April 1935, another torso surfaces on a sandbar near Big Creek. This one belongs to a stocky male in his 40s, tattoo of an exotic bird on the shoulder, perhaps a clue, but the ink is homemade, indistinct. His head, arms, and legs are gone. Reporters dub him the Tattooed Man, and print sketches of the bird in every edition, begging readers for recognition. Hundreds claim familiarity, yet none can name him definitively. The morgue shelves another John Doe. By now, whispers about the killer's boldness spread like smoke. He seems to taunt the city, choosing public places where discovery is inevitable, as if he enjoys watching citizens shiver behind headlines. Police Commissioner Martin O'Donnell asks Safety Director Eliot Ness for stronger measures. Ness, newly famous for smashing Capone's bootlegging empire, strides into Cleveland City Hall with a resolve forged in Chicago gunfire. "We'll flood the run with blue," he vows. But inside, even Ness wonders how to hunt an enemy who dismembers identity itself. Night after night, streetlights flicker over Kingsbury Run like dying stars, and the river mutters against its banks. Somewhere beyond the glow, steel teeth flash in a practiced hand. The butcher is already selecting his next canvas of flesh. Chapter 2. Rail Yard Revenants and the Shadow of Eliot Ness. "Step back into the smoke," the narrator urges. The year is 1936 now, and Cleveland's heartbeat sounds like an iron wheel screeching on rusted rail. Kingsbury Run has become a living nightmare. A slum of shacks hammered from shipping crates, laced with alleyways where the damp never dries. Police spotlights sweep the ravine every night, painting rows of tar paper roofs in ghostly arcs. But light only deepens the darkness between beams, and it is there, exactly there, that the butcher moves. The discovery of victims, 5 and 6, March 5th, 1936. A cold drizzle frets the city. 2 drunkards stumble along the East 20th Street Bridge when one slips on wet girder iron and looks down into the gulch below. There, resting on a trash-clogged slope, lies the upper half of a man's torso. Skin drained chalk white, arms gone at the shoulder sockets like the snapped wings of a toy soldier. Police arrive to find the lower half 200 feet away, wedged against a sewer grate. Press photographers fire bulbs that burst like tiny suns, and by dawn, Clevelanders eat breakfast beneath black ink headlines. 2 more for the mad butcher. Dr. Samuel Gerber sighs as the newest remains reach his marble table. He catalogues the now familiar signatures, clean blade work, elongated incisions, and a final flourish. The victim was emasculated. The killer's scalpel is evolving, Gerber notes, his methodology sharpening. Whatever compulsion drives him is becoming bolder, crueler. 3 weeks later, April 8th, children skirt the edge of Jackass Hill, a mound of slag near the Pennsylvania and Ohio rail lines, hunting for cigarette butts to resell. One girl shrieks when she uncovers a burlap sack that moves, or seems to. Inside, 2 severed arms, wrapped tight together like lovers locked in a grotesque embrace. Nearby, patrolmen unearth a headless corpse, abdomen split to drain blood far from the scene. Victim 6. Newspapers christen him the Hobo Head, though no head is ever found. Fear now ripples beyond Kingsbury Run, spilling into middle-class parlor rooms and downtown boardrooms. Employers warn clerks not to stray from lit streets. Pastors thunder that sin attracts devils with butcher knives. Yet for the transient poor, the warnings ring hollow. They live where the devil hunts. Ness takes the stage. Enter Eliot Ness, coat collar whipped by lake wind as he surveys the ravine from atop the Kinsman Road viaduct. Where others smell only coal dust and garbage, Ness inhales a challenge. He convenes an emergency task force. Detective Peter Merillo, grim and dogged. Sergeant Orley May, sharpshooter turned crime scene analyst. Patrol Captain William Hurtle, who knows every trackside speakeasy from Cedar to Carnegie. Ness orders wartime discipline. "We flood the run," he growls. "We hit every shack, every boxcar, every gin joint. If this killer breathes in Cleveland, we'll choke off his air." For 3 nights straight, whistles shriek as 100 cops sweep shanty towns with billy clubs tapping door frames like drums of doom. They catalog knives, cleavers, even pocket scalpels filched from charity clinics. But the butcher is smoke. Every fistful of air closes on emptiness. Voiceover pauses, lets rain hiss against corrugated roofs. "Listen," it murmurs. That is the sound of desperation, law pounding at rotten wood, while a murderer slips between floorboards like a rat made of shadows. The hell of hobo jungles. To catch a phantom, Detective Merillo descends deeper. Clad in ragged overalls, he rides freight cars under a false name, sharing stew thick with axle grease. At midnight campfires, he coaxes stories from boxcar prophets. "Saw a doc with shiny boots poking round the pit," rasps one old-timer. "Nah, it's the smelter foreman, keeps pig heads in a bag," claims another. Merillo scribbles notes but trusts none of them. Gossip is currency in the jungle, traded for warmth or a slug of bootleg. Yet one rumor repeats often enough to shiver him. A tall man with a medical satchel who offers free liquor laced with medicine that numbs the legs before the world fades to black. Meanwhile, forensic chemist Raymond Pinker, borrowed from Los Angeles PD, analyzes tissue. He detects traces of chlorobutanol, a surgical anesthetic rarely found outside hospitals. Somebody, Pinker says, is sedating victims before dismembering them. The discovery narrows the suspect pool. Hospital orderlies, morgue assistants, perhaps a coroner's aide haunting the night with stolen vials. Still, evidence is vapor. Ness's political enemies, Mayor Burton's rivals, bitter ward bosses, openly jeer. Capone was easier. At least you could see him, they scoff. Ness answers by doubling patrols. City treasuries strain, overtime coffers bleed, but taxpayers clutch headlines like talismans and demand more blue on the streets. The seventh victim, a woman named Florence. June 1936 delivers a heat wave that turns the Cuyahoga into sour broth. On the 9th, a transient scavenging in a dump near East 37th discovers a woman's head neatly wrapped in newspaper dated just 2 days prior. Her eyes are closed, lashes burned away by some chemical rinse. Teeth bear a gold cap, offering the first real chance at identification. Detectives canvass dentists until Dr. Francis Walsh recognizes his work. The woman is Florence Polillo, 42, barmaid, occasional bootleg runner. For the first time, the butcher has a name attached to his art. Reporters seize on her tragic history, abusive lovers, gin parlor debts, and spin lurid copy. But hidden in her dental chart is a breakthrough. Dr. Walsh recalls Florence complained about a doctor friend who offered cut-rate surgery in a cheap downtown office. The friend's name, however, is lost to gossip. Ness assigns Merylo to trace every unlicensed medical suite within a 2-mile radius. They raid flophouse infirmaries, windowless rooms reeking of ether, blood crusting on wash basins. They seize scalpels, bone saws, lengths of rubber tubing. Yet each proprietor, a desperate sawbones treating gangrene for pennies, produces alibis that squirm but never break. Public fury crescendos. Editorials liken the butcher to Jack the Ripper. Radio hosts dramatize nightly patrol logs, letting listeners imagine footsteps behind them on empty streets. Sales of revolvers spike. In the Union Terminal, a poster warns travelers, "Never go alone to Kingsbury Run, a city on edge, late July, midnight." Patrolman James Wagner pauses under the new Lorraine Carnegie Bridge and lights a lucky strike. Smoke twirls round the girders, and suddenly a silhouette darts between pylons, dragging something limp. Wagner gives chase, revolver drawn, but the figure melts into stacked rail ties. All he finds is a blood-slick burlap sack containing 2 fresh human thighs, severed clean. The butcher was working mere yards from a busy thoroughfare. He is growing fearless, or mocking. Ness convenes an emergency summit of 50 detectives inside City Hall's oak-paneled chamber. He slams a fist on the table so hard a pen leaps, skittering across polished wood. "We either stop him now," he snarls, "or we watch this city burn with panic." Yet after hours of maps and timelines, the butcher remains a pin that refuses to stick. The railroad car raid, August 16th. Acting on a tip, Merylo and Hertel storm an abandoned Pullman coach rusting on siding near East 55th. Inside, they discover a macabre workshop. Blood-stained canvas, glass jars of congealed fat, a hacksaw whose teeth shine beneath a crust of rust and tissue. In a corner stands a tripod camera, film missing. Whoever worked here packed up in haste, but not without leaving a final message. Scrawled on the wall in chalk, a single word: catch. Press screams that Ness has found the butcher's lair. Yet Pinker's lab results depress hopes. The blood is bovine, not human. The canvas once held slaughterhouse scrap. Some prankster, or perhaps the killer himself, has staged an elaborate feint. Ness feels the city's faith slipping through his fingers like grease. The psychologist's profile. Desperate, Ness invites Dr. Walter Lanz, a pioneer of criminal psychology, to draft a profile. Lanz posits that the killer exhibits operant sadism, medical proficiency, and symbolic possession of victims through decapitation. He believes the butcher keeps trophies, most likely the skulls, revisiting them to relive dominance. Such predators, Lanz warns, often escalate until captured or dead. He advises Ness to look for a man who drifts between respectability and squalor, comfortable in both clinic corridors and hobo encampments. Voiceover lingers. Imagine, it says, a man who shakes a surgeon's hand at noon, then drinks rot gut with transients at midnight. A chameleon who wears poverty like a borrowed coat and discards it when the blade comes out. A glimpse into the killer's mind. Days later, the Cleveland Press receives a letter. Blocks of mismatched type cut from classifieds, pasted onto cheap stationery. I have more pieces than the morgue can count. I shall deliver them where your flashbulbs can see. Some heads are meant to be removed. No signature. Gerber studies the grammar. Clinical, detached. Could be genuine, could be a hoax. Ness keeps the note hidden, fearing copycats. But the promise within it chills every detective. I have more pieces. He is inventorying humans. The aftermath, and a rising tide of dread. Summer wanes. Heat turns corpses quick, and every foul smell wafting from a garbage lot sparks frantic calls. Police dig through rotten cabbage, only to find nothing but fish bones. Still, the public's collective heart races in fight or flight. Whispers slither into playgrounds, factories, union halls. The butcher has become folklore, a bogeyman children dare each other to summon by chanting nursery rhymes about Headless Harry. Adults scoff, but their eyes track every stranger's hands. And somewhere, in a rented room or a rail car rattling past silent cornfields, the mad butcher sharpens steel, humming perhaps, as he readies pieces for Chapter 3. Chapter 3. Summer of the Cleaver. The voice returns like a match struck in pitch black, sparking orange against endless night. June 1937, it whispers. Cleveland bakes beneath a dusty sun, and the killer's blade grows restless. The Torso Slayer, a name now carved into every newspaper front page, has not struck for nearly 10 months. Some citizens dare to hope the terror died with winter. Bars reopen along Kingsbury's edges, speakeasy pianos resume their ragged jazz, and in hobo jungles, men gamble cigarettes on whether the butcher hopped a westbound freight. But Detective Peter Merillo tastes dread the way miners taste gas before an explosion. He feels it in the knots of his gut each dawn he wakes alive. The Carnegie jawbone. Hope shatters on the morning of June 6th when laborers clearing brush beside an abandoned factory on Carnegie Avenue discover a burlap bundle bound with sash cord. Within lies a human jaw, teeth intact, gums scraped raw as though pulled from a mouth still fighting to bite. Search parties fan out. By sunset, they have unearthed a torso, arms and legs, packaged in separate cloth sacks, stacked behind a crumbling brick wall like parcels awaiting postage. The head remains missing, but coroners will later note faint stubble. A white male in his 30s, recently shaved. A rare glimpse of the butcher's timeline between capture and cut. Samuel Gerber opens the torso along prior scars of horror. He records deep, confident strokes, unspooling intestines with the detached reverence of a priest turning pages of a forbidden book. Unlike earlier victims, this man's heart and liver are removed entirely. Gerber's scalpel pauses mid-air. The killer is escalating from decapitation to harvesting. Surgeons call it visceral evisceration. Gerber calls it a message. I am perfecting my craft. Eliot Ness studies autopsy photos until his cigarette ash droops perilously. He orders door-to-door canvases along Carnegie and Cedar, demands hospital supply audits for missing surgical twine, and authorizes 2 plainclothes units to shadow every morgue attendant in Cuyahoga County. Yet each shift change brings new faces, interns rotating, orderlies quitting for steel mill wages. The city hemorrhages people faster than Ness can memorize them. The twin torsos of Doane Brook. Barely 3 weeks later, July the 2nd, a young Works Progress Administration surveyor wades through reeds lining Doane Brook, mapping soil erosion, when his pole snags something yielding. He expects a drowned dog. Instead, the water releases a female torso, stark white against the algae, ribcage clean as bleached coral. Police net the remains. Half a mile upstream, they drag out another torso, male, missing arms and legs. 2 kills, dumped together. Reporters christen them the twins, though they never met in life. Their blood type matches. Gerber theorizes they were drained into the same tub, then dismembered sequentially, a macabre assembly line. Fear metastasizes. Board of Education officers escort children home from summer school in groups of 10. Union terminal porters refuse tips to carry luggage down unlit stairwells. The Cleveland Orchestra cancels its riverfront concert, fearing empty seats or worse. Occupied seats suddenly vacated by people who vanish on the walk back to parked cars. On July 10th, City Council holds an emergency night session. Sweat drips from aldermen's collars as citizens jam the balcony, shouting for curfews, for martial law, for something. Ness stands at the podium, eyes hollow from sleepless nights, and pledges again, "We will remove the killer's hunting ground." Skeptics heckle. One woman screams, "My brother was the tattooed man," before sobbing into her hat. The fire in the run. Mid-August delivers Ness's most drastic gambit. Under moonless sky, 90 policemen led by Sergeant Orley May spread through Kingsbury Run, torches and gasoline cans in hand. They give residents 10 minutes to grab what they own, often nothing more than a crust of bread and a lice-eaten blanket, then ignite match after match. Shanties erupt like paper lanterns, flames leaping 30 feet into the night. The roar echoes down the ravine. Charred sparks swirl above railroad trestles like evil fireflies. Voiceover slows, as if ashamed. "Imagine the cries," it says. The butcher's victims never screamed loud enough to save themselves, but the living do. They plead to keep their meager roofs. They curse the cops. They stagger away under a red sky that tastes like burning tar. Ness watches from the ridge, jaw locked. He prays the butcher is among those fleeing silhouettes, stripped of shadows and hiding places. Yet even as tin roofs crumple, Detective Merillo feels despair. The murderer is not a hobo bound by shanty walls. He is an idea wearing skin, free to slip into any alley left standing. The next morning, char mass still smolders. Photojournalists capture lakes of melted glass, a doll's scorched face staring from ash. The Plain Dealer headline reads, "Ness starts war on butcher, shantytown eradicated." Editorial boards split. Some hail his boldness. Others accuse him of torching poverty to create an illusion of progress. Privately, Ness wonders if he has traded human misery for political theater, and whether the butcher watched the blaze from some doctor's office window, smiling. A suspect at last, the drifter with a doctor's bag. September 5th, 1937, exactly 3 years after the first known torso. A tipsy roustabout named Tommy Tinder Royce staggers into a police kiosk near Prospect Avenue, babbling about a handyman doc who tends to cuts for the rail riders. Royce claims the man offered him a flask laced with something sweet, after which he woke hours later with wrists bound and a saw buzzing near his ears. In a panic, he headbutted the doc and fled, still woozy. Royce's story might be the usual booze nonsense, but he bears ligature abrasions and a shallow slice under his ear, precisely where the butcher often begins his work. Ness orders Merillo to shadow Royce back into the jungle, this time with 2 undercover men close enough to intervene. For 3 nights they wait. On the 4th, a tall figure emerges from shadows, medical satchel swinging. He speaks softly, offering liquor for the shakes. When Royce hesitates, the man reaches for his bag latch, and the detectives pounce. A chase explodes through the rail yard, past slag heaps and idle boxcars. The suspect is strong, vaulting couplers with athletic grace, but Detective Robert Cajo corners him at a chain-link fence. They wrestle. The bag spills open. Hypodermic needles, a glass vial of chlorobutanol, cotton soaked in carbolic acid, a bone saw wrapped in oilcloth. They haul the suspect into Central Station. His name, Dr. Francis E. Sweeney, 43, a disgraced physician once employed at a Veterans Administration hospital. Records show he served as a medic in World War I, specializing in battlefield amputations, the very craft the butcher appears to relish. The polygraph battle. Ness personally oversees interrogation. Sweeney is gaunt yet dignified, smelling of ether and stale gin. He denies all accusations, claims his satchel is for treating hobos too poor for hospitals. "I know hardship," he says, voice gravelly. "Why would I harm them?" Yet his calm erodes under questioning. Sweat blankets his brow, pupils dart. Ness submits him to a polygraph, an emerging science, unreliable but tantalizing. Expert Leonard Keeler himself administers 2 sessions. Both times the needle jabs into violent spikes when Sweeney is asked about decapitation. Keeler leans in and mutters to Ness, he's hiding something dark. But truth is cruelly legalistic. Sweeney's answers, though evasive, never cross into confession. No blood, no trophies, no eyewitness places him at a crime scene, only a doctor's bag and a tremor in his voice. Worse, Sweeney's cousin is Congressman Martin L. Sweeney, a bitter political foe of Ness's allies. When news of the arrest leaks, the congressman decries a smear campaign against his kin. Lawyers descend like carrion birds with writs and subpoenas. Facing public spectacle, Ness commits Sweeney to a state hospital for nervous exhaustion, an end run to keep him off the streets without formal charges. He hopes confinement might cool the killings, proving guilt indirectly. Yet the move reeks of backroom desperation. Reporters bristle. Civil rights advocates cry police tyranny. Ness's legend, once bulletproof, develops fissures, and still the blood flows. October 1937 passes without incident, as if the butcher is taking stock, savoring chaos. But on November 16th, 2 boys hunting rats under the West 3rd Street Bridge discover a torso jammed inside a wooden crate sprinkled with quicklime. The killer has returned, unimpeded by shantytown fires or psychiatric wards. Worse, quicklime suggests acceleration, an attempt to melt flesh faster, taunting Gerber's scalpel. Ness's hands shake as he flicks ash into the morgue tray. If Sweeney is locked away, who wielded the saw this time? Voiceover cuts in like static on a radio. Perhaps the mad butcher is not one man at all, but an idea others can inherit, a trade passed from monster to monster. The thought chills deeper than December wind. Winter weighs upon Cleveland. Snow muffles the ravine, blanketing charred ruins like a shroud. Yet Detective Marilow knows snow also silences footsteps, hides blood until spring thaw. He sleeps in a spare cot at Central Station, coat as blanket, dreaming of headless bodies frozen upright in drifts like obscene snowmen. And somewhere, in an attic reeking of iodine, or a tunnel beneath bridge pilings, a blade glints beneath kerosene light, eager for Chapter 4. Chapter 4, Blood on the Snow, Echo in the Steel. The first snow of 1938 drifts over Cleveland like confetti at a funeral. Street corner Santas ring bells, but the city's children sidestep curbside shadows as though every alley mouth has fangs. In the shanty lots, now skeletal after Ness's fires, drifters huddle in reframed refrigerator crates, wind howling through warped boards as if the whole ravine is trying to speak. On January 26th, a Lancaster and Ohio brakeman trudges along the frozen Cuyahoga, tapping rails with a crowbar. Ice crystals glitter between ties, and then his crowbar strikes something too soft for iron, too hard for snow. He kicks loose crusted slush and sees a shriveled hand, clenched as though gripping an invisible rail of its own. By dusk, the entire body is exhumed from the icy bank, headless, arms removed at the elbow, heart scooped out, leaving a cavern of frozen crimson. Samuel Gerber chips frost from the corpse beneath morgue lamps, each chip ticking against the tray like tiny metronome beats. He finds the same anesthetic traces, but new cruelty. The killer cauterized wounds with a portable iron, perhaps to slow blood loss and keep the victim alive longer. Gerber lowers his mask and whispers, "He is learning to control time." Eliot Ness stands at the window of Central Station, watching steam curl off train stacks. He clenches a telegram from Washington. Federal funding for the Torso Task Force expires in 60 days. No arrest, no funds, no overtime. The numbers tighten like a garrote around his reputation. Detective Merillo digs trenches through snowdrifts along Kingsbury Run, talking to vagrants whose beards clink with frost. They describe a new legend. White Coat Joe, a man in a doctor's smock who roams the ravine offering soup from a tin pail at dusk. Those who sip, they say, wake in darkness with arms numb, or do not wake at all. The description fits no hospital issue. Surgeons wear green now, not white. But folklore has its own palette. When March thaws the river, two more torsos surface in burlap, male and female, tied together back to back like some grotesque valentine. Quicklime has eaten their faces to a blank mask. Reporters dub them the Faceless Lovers. A city that once prided itself on new Art Deco skylines now measures its year in corpses. The voiceover lowers to a hush. "Listen to the river," it says. "Every ripple is a secret the butcher thinks he can drown. But secrets rot, and rot floats." The red tag file. Deep in police archives, Sergeant Orley May assembles a wall of butcher paper covered in red tags, each tag a timeline of a victim's last known hours. He notices a chilling pattern. On the nights before every discovery, Westside Hospital logs a missing vial of anesthetic or a broken lock on the supply cage. The thefts are too small to trigger alarms, but their dates align like vertebrae. May rushes to Ness. "We have a mole in white shoes." Two interns stand out. Dr. Emmett Cairns, quiet, meticulous, and Nurse Dora Gunderson, moonlighting as a mortician's assistant. Ness orders round-the-clock tales, yet the butcher, almost prescient, vanishes for 72 dead silent days, as if he can feel eyes on his neck. April 17th, the vigilance slips. Cairns trades, shifts with a friend, slips out a side door carrying a violin case. That night, a security guard at the municipal boathouse glimpses a shadow hefting something long and wrapped in oilskin onto the pier. By dawn, gulls peck at a headless torso propped on a life preserver drifting beneath the lighthouse, its chest cavity stuffed with sheet music. The sheet's first line reads, "Andante ma non troppo." Gerber whispers, "He's composing symphonies in meat." Chapter 5. Portrait of a Phantom. The city's editorial pages now call for resignation. Some demand the National Guard. Ness answers with bureaucracy. He consolidates every torso file, evidence bags, polygraphs, morgue photos, into a single locked room the press nicknames the Chamber of Horrors. Inside, psychologist Dr. Walter Lanz unspools wire recordings of suspect interviews, listening for vocal tremors, pauses, telltale stutters of guilt. One tape crackles. Francis Sweeney's calm baritone describing combat amputations in France. How nerves sang like harp strings when sliced alive. Lanz replays the phrase harp strings a dozen times. Each syllable feels like fingers plucking steel. Yet new tips flood daily. A butcher's apprentice claims his boss keeps pig heads in numbered jars. A roustabout swears a Catholic priest tends wounds with a hacksaw. Detective Merillo, drowning in rumor, invents a code. Smoke for unverified gossip, ash for tips already burned, coal for leads still with heat, flame for actionable intel. By summer, his evidence board is mostly smoke and ash. July 6th, a reunion of out-of-work roustabouts in a flophouse cellar turns ugly when a drunk named Charlie Billups screams that the torso boy is among them. Fists fly, oil lamps smash, and firefighters later drag 8 bodies, mercifully intact, from the blaze. None match the butcher, but the riot births a rumor that the killer is invincible, able to turn men against each other and watch the spectacle like a god of rails and ruin. Voiceover drifts. Fear is the butcher's finest blade, it intones. It cuts deeper than steel, and it never rusts. The St. Malachy warnings. On August 18th, Father Dolan of St. Malachy Parish receives a confessional note slid beneath his office door. Cut and pasted letters reading, "Bless this flesh for it will walk no more." Taped to it is a dried human ear, pierced with a safety pin. For once, the head arrives before the torso. 2 days later, joggers find that ear's owner, decapitated, limbs gnawed by rats, in an abandoned trolley tunnel. The butcher may have staged the body days earlier, letting vermin disfigure evidence. He's rewriting his own procedure manual in blood and shadows. Ness's patience snaps. He stalks into the chamber of horrors and rips thumbtacks from walls, silent as snowfall. "Scrap the patterns," he mutters. "Think chaos, think theater." He orders every crime scene photo reprojected at life-size onto hanger walls at the city's decommissioned airfield, creating a macabre gallery. Detectives walk between translucent screens of flesh, studying angles of incision. They notice tiny triangular bites missing from every torso's right thigh, never before recorded. A distinctive notch of steel in the killer's blade, perhaps. A citywide blade audit ensues. Abattoirs, hospitals, restaurants. In a speakeasy basement, detectives find a meat cleaver ground into a strange crescent, its edge chipped just enough to leave triangular divots. The owner, a short-order cook named Francis Langer, twice dismissed from hospital kitchens for stealing anesthetic. But Langer has airtight alibis during 3 murder nights, proven by punch clock stamps. Realization dawns, multiple killers, or an accomplice forging tools. Gerber exhales cigarette smoke into morgue air, heavy with preservative, and for the first time he says aloud, "We may be hunting a ring." Chapter 6. Hotel Room Number 19. Autumn rain turns Kingsbury Run into a slurry of rust and sorrow. On September 23rd, the Holland & Hotel maid unlocks room 19 expecting unmade sheets. Instead, she finds blood sprayed across wallpaper like jazz trumpets frozen mid-blast. In the bathtub, soaks a woman's torso, hot water long since cooled, sheets of skin flensing away in scarlet ribbons. The head, arms and legs sit neatly in the wardrobe, each joint wrapped with butcher paper stamped Holland & Laundry. A door sign reads, "Do not disturb." Detectives trace the room key to Mr. Frank Dolezal, a Hungarian laborer who checked in alone 2 nights prior. His signature wobbles, ink smeared as though hands shook. They raid his boarding house. Under his mattress lie clippings of every torso headline, circles drawn in red pencil. Dolezal is dragged into Central Station, bruises blooming as he protests in broken English. Under interrogation, 12 hours, no lawyer, he confesses to killing the hotel victim, plus Florence Polillo from 1936. He describes strangling, dismembering with a razor-sharp kitchen knife, dumping parts in the river. The press rejoices, butcher caught. Yet Samuel Gerber listens to tape of the confession and frowns. Dolezal claims he lopped off heads with 1 stroke, but Gerber's forensic notes show saw marks, not chops. Moreover, Dolezal is 5'5", slight. Sawing through femur takes strength and knowledge of leverage. Ness, exhausted, nonetheless parades the confession, political lifeline within reach. 6 weeks later, Dolezal hangs himself in his cell using a bedsheet. Autopsy reveals cracked ribs, a busted nose, injuries inconsistent with suicide alone. Rumors ignite. Cops beat him into false confession. The real butcher walks free. Headlines flip. Butcher still at large. Police scandal. Ness's lifeline snaps. Voiceover hovers, solemn. Cleveland has given the killer a new victim. but this one wears a badge of innocence. Chapter 7. Night of the Phantom Siren, December 1938. Snowflakes swirl through neon glow as Christmas shoppers scurry, collars up, humming silver bells over jittery hearts. A patrol car screams down Carnegie, tires skidding on slush. A caller claimed to witness a man dumping a sack under the Eagle Avenue viaduct. Detective Merillo arrives to find not a sack, but a tableau. 5 severed heads mounted on fence posts, lips stitched shut with catgut. All are the missing crania of previous victims, preserved somehow, faces waxy. Beneath them, a chalked message, "You found your voices too late." Panic becomes riot. Citizens storm City Hall demanding federal martial law. Ness stands before microphones, voice hollow. "We will not bow to terror." But inside, he drafts resignation. Before signing, he drives alone to Kingsbury Run, parking where shanties once burned. Snow muffles city sounds. Only the river gurgles, oily and eternal. Ness kneels, presses his palm to soot-blackened dirt, and vows silently, "I will not leave until I bury you." That night he storms the state asylum where Francis Sweeney resides. Sweeney, doped on sedatives, smiles a languid grin and murmurs, "You should have stayed in Chicago." Ness slams him against barred windows. "Is this your finale?" he roars. "Those heads, your encore." Sweeney only laughs, an empty rattle, and whispers, "Encore implies ending, director. There is no ending." Ness staggers out, hands trembling. He realizes the last cruelty. The butcher's truest weapon is uncertainty. He murders, yes, but he also murders closure. Chapter 8. Coda in Rust and Rain. Winter yields reluctantly to 1939. No new bodies appear, yet the city doesn't breathe easier. It simply holds its breath longer between nightmares. Families move away, claiming ghosts scaled the viaducts into their dreams. Children chant skip-rope rhymes, ring around the rail yard, torsos tumble down, heads off, we all fall down. Detective Merillo retires early, insomnia carving hollows beneath his eyes. He keeps a trunk of case files in his attic, paper corners moldering to fuzz. Sometimes at midnight, he swears he hears rail whistles that haven't run for years. Samuel Gerber lectures at medical colleges about forensic limits, holding up photos of triangular blade notches like stigmata. Students take notes, faces pale, then ask if the killer was ever found. Gerber's silence is its own syllabus. Science will not always save you. Eliot Ness loses the mayoral race in 47, reputation dulled by a phantom he never caught. He drifts into private security, his untouchable aura tarnished by liquor and regret. On quiet evenings, he rereads transcripts of Sweeney's polygraph, those jagged needles like heartbeats flatlining on paper. Francis Sweeney dies in 1964, still institutionalized and never charged. Nurses claim he sometimes traced invisible lines in the air, as if sawing ghosts. They buried him under a cedar tree, head attached, the irony unnoticed by all but the wind. And the butcher? Some say he was Sweeney. Others say a cabal of rail yard surgeons performing rituals for reasons lost to gin and fever. Still others whisper he walks today, an old man who presses 2 fingers to his neck sometimes, feeling for a pulse, remembering those he sent pulseless into dark water. Voiceover softens, final, like a curtain drawn. Kingsbury Run is green now, cleaned, landscaped. But dig deep enough, and you'll still find bone chips whitening the soil. History calls the murders unsolved. Cleveland calls them a nightmare best forgotten. But every city has its Kingsbury Run, every era its mad butcher, waiting for fog, for hunger, for night trains to whistle their lonely invitation. If this real story chilled your blood and stirred echoes of footsteps behind you, share it so others learn how darkness hides beneath familiar streets. Subscribe to Crazy Real Horror Stories and ring the bell, because the past still walks, and we will be here to tell you when it knocks again. Stay vigilant, stay alive.